The Wilbur Payne Award is generally awarded for what they deem as excellence in operations research. I think the main criteria were, the soundness of the analysis, the potential impacts of the research itself, and then the need, or whether it addressed a specific need in the Army, whether it was relevant to the current fight or to the current issues the Army faced. Well, the issue was there was a lot of concern about wasted manpower, inefficient use of manpower, with lieutenants graduating from a commissioning source and then eventually making it to their units. But there was a big lag time based on the demand signal and the supply of training allocations, that there was a big lag in lieutenants arriving to their units. There were upfront first order impacts, and the first order impact obviously is the wasted man hours or man days. The other aspect is that idle time, in addition to having people not used effectively or efficiently, there's also the issue of people being a little bit frustrated with going through 4 years of a process on their way to become a commissioned officer, and then getting to the end and realizing, okay, now I have to wait 6 months before my training starts. And oh, by the way, that's 6 months wait time. I'm not paid, I don't have a job, and I'm just waiting. So the second order effects was the frustration effect or the morale effect caused by those wait times. So the things that were really causing the lag time are you have a non-steady demand signal for requirements. So the demand signal was non-uniform. There were spikes in the demand signal. The supply side in the training pipeline, that rate was uniform throughout the year, same training allocations throughout the year, and so that immediately causes a backlog. Additionally, you throw in some other complicating factors. You have sources of commission, the different sources of commission receiving different allocations of those spaces, and that sort of exacerbates the problem, as well as trying to match all that with unit rotation cycles, which made it kind of a difficult problem to deal with. So the current scheduling process for ROTC is, if the first person to be commissioned, if I'm commissioned on this date and somebody's commissioned a week after me, I was commissioned before him or her, so I get to go to my specialty training first. That decision is divorced from what my unit is doing and what cycle my unit is in. So that was one of the things that we looked at in the model, was instead of scheduling people based on when they roll, strictly by when they rolled out of their commissioning source, let's consider also when their unit is going to deploy, so they can get there prior to the unit leaving, which would be ideal. So to do that, and then so that's the scheduling piece. Then there's the whole allocation piece. So as I said, that the training pipeline is set up so there's a constant capacity in each particular course throughout the year, in several different courses. And so each of these sources of commission are given seats, allocated seats for those courses. And the way that's done is, I sat in on it, the way it's done is a big giant meeting, everybody's represented, and they go around the table and they go, okay, this course number 1 for this particular specialty, West Point, how many seats do you need? ROTC, how many seats do you need? OCS, how many seats do you need? National Guard. They go around the table and they say, okay, well, we've only got 100 seats for this particular class. We're right at 100, that's it. And then they do some jockeying around. But all that allocation, again, is divorced from what the unit is doing. So they're allocating spaces that potentially impact when people get their units without thinking about that at the time. So the allocation thing, that's part of it, is making that decision without that in mind. The other part is there's real no check in the system on whether each of those sources of commission needed that many spaces for that particular course. And the default, which caused some problems here, the default is to give West Point whatever they need for allocations at the expense of ROTC or OCS. So what we did is we modeled the as-is system, and then we built the as-is system with the ability to do what if on 4 primary scenarios that came up during stakeholder conversations. The 4 primary scenarios were the ability to manipulate course capacity. So instead of having that constant amount of capacity in a particular training course throughout the entire year, maybe during the surge period when we have the big spike in May or June, maybe we increase it, not dramatically, but increase it a little bit during that period of time. Any number of ways, by using reserve component manpower, things like that, which are commonly done to increase the course capacity. With just a 5% increase in capacity in 3 of the specialty courses, infantry, MP, and military police and armor, we could decrease the ROTC wait time for the specialty training by by about 30 days, which equates to 60,000 man days. The second scenario was focused on that issue of scheduling and allocating the spaces. So scheduling and allocating those constant amount of spaces in each class. So the scheduling piece, we built in a business rule that looked at when your unit was scheduled to deploy, and then built a priority scale for all units based on that time to deploy. And then that information was matched up with an individual who was supposed to be assigned to that unit, and that was considered when individuals were scheduled for their courses. The allocation piece of that 2-part problem, we dealt with that by looking at the existing allocations as were done in actually executed in FY10, and saw what the West Point ROTC share was for each course, and then we simply adjusted the allocations between West Point and ROTC during those surge months of June and July to see what the impacts were. And there we saw by doing that, by taking away about 2 months worth of allocations from West Point, just delaying West Point 2 months, that we could get ROTC lieutenants to their unit 3 weeks earlier, which is pretty significant. The fourth one was the ability to adjust the demand signal. So right as I told you before, the demand signal, we have a big spike in May, June, which corresponds to when most colleges graduate, which is expected. And instead, what we wanted to do was experiment with the ability to shift that demand signal a little bit by forcing in some way or developing a program in some way where ROTC students could, instead of graduating in May or June, they could graduate in December maybe. And basically what we're doing is we're flattening that peak in May, June, and shifting some of that to the right, which would ideally, if you think through it, would reduce some of the wait times, reduce some of the demand, and match the supply a little bit better with the demand in that peak period. You still have wait times and lag, but we saw that a 20% reduction in taking 20% of the ROTC graduates that were supposed to graduate in the May time period and shifting them to December. It allowed you to actually decrease the BOLIC wait time, the basic officer leader course wait time for ROTC, from the average of 123 days down to 85 days, which is huge. And by the way, the Army's goal, as published in one of their regulations, is they're 90 days. They'd like the wait time across the board, all branches, all sources of commission, to be 90 days. So that adjustment alone accomplishes that. It was sort of caveat with the funding that we received for the project, and that was the people funding it said, the Army's going to ProModel. The Army has several existing models, the Arfrigen Sync tool, the Bog Dwell model, all these things. All 3 of those, and my model, and all 3 of those models right now all pull something from the Arfrigen Sync tool. And the Arfrigen Sync tool is done in ProModel. So their thought was, let's try at all costs to have a model that we're going to create that is remotely related to these topics and pulls data from the Arfrigen Sync tool. Let's do it in ProModel, with the long-term vision of being able to integrate all these separate models done in ProModel that all touch the same thing, the ArtForGen Sync tool, and then get a common model across the enterprise. ProModel itself is, flexible. It's pretty powerful. The size of problems you can represent in are pretty amazing, as well as visual. Everybody likes to see something visual. They like to be able to see the system and see what adjustments in the system will do in the outputs or in the process itself. The person that we briefed, General Frakley, at their Accessions command, he was very happy with it. He wanted to latch more things onto it. He wanted added components to it, and I think he thought. Obviously, he thought highly enough of it, or thought the work was of quality, because he's the one that nominated it for the Paint Award. And so the work ended up winning the Paint Award. The client was the one that nominated it for the Paint Award, so he was happy with it. He's just a very ambitious guy and immediately saw the potential for, okay, good, let's add this, let's add the reserve component, let's add more specialties to this model, let's do this, let's add a cost component to this model where we capture all the costs of making these decisions. So he definitely was very supportive of it and happy with the results.